A new ambassador arrives in Pretoria, but he steps into more than a residence. He steps into a relationship under strain. This week, Brent Bozell III assumed office as the new United States ambassador to South Africa, representing the United States at a particularly delicate moment in relations with South Africa. The post has been vacant since the departure of Reuben Brigety. In the months since, tensions have simmered from Pretoria's case against Israel at the International Court of Justice to Washington's criticism of South Africa's foreign policy posture and the diplomatic fallout surrounding the expulsion of our former ambassador to the United States, Ebrahim Rasool. So let's get into that conversation then and pick it up. Can trust be rebuilt after public friction? Can strategic interests override ideological differences? And what would constructive diplomacy look like between the two nations that need each other but do not always agree? Let's unpack all of this. I'm joined about what's on the new ambassador's to-do list. I'm joined by Anthony van Nieuwkerk, Professor of International and Diplomacy Studies at the University of South Africa. Good afternoon. It's good to see you. So let's start with the significance of the arrival of Brent Bozell III to be the next ambassador to South Africa. Is there significance to the mere fact of the appointment of an ambassador, despite the rhetoric, despite the tensions of the last year and a half or so?
Yeah, no, indeed, Tula Sizwe, it's nice to see you on live camera as well. If two countries have a strained relationship and they cannot find peaceful ways of coexist, they will not appoint an ambassador. They might have a shadow presence in an embassy in a building, but they will not appoint a prominent, important individual to represent the country's interests. And that would be a signal or a sign of a broken relationship, a tense relationship, and quite worrying. Now, in our case, it is very significant that the Trump administration has decided to send an ambassador, a high-level representative to Pretoria, to South Africa, to represent the interests of the Trump administration and the American country at large. And in fact, I would argue that we need to reciprocate fairly quickly by doing exactly the same, if indeed our government of national unity believes that America, whether we like the Trump administration's ideology or not, is actually an important trading partner and an important force on the global stage. So yes, the short answer is it's significant that the ambassador has arrived. We're waiting for him to present his papers of accreditation. Our president will shake his hand and then it's business. And that is the kind of issues that I think we need to explore a little bit more. What kind of business will the ambassador put on the table for us?
Well, in fact, let's do exactly that. Let's start with that question of presenting credentials, because that really is the marker, the stamp that makes it official that he is now the ambassador to South Africa. People who are not practitioners of diplomacy and international relations, it's quite easy for us to say President Ramaphosa should not accept his credentials based on his past posture in relation to South Africa and the struggle against apartheid and the liberation movements, but also just his own understandings of what is happening in South Africa. But is it that simple? And what would be the implications of not accepting his credentials?
Yeah. No, it is complex, Tula Sizwe. This is not an easy matter. And the relationship between South Africa as an African leader and a prominent player on the African continent on peace and security, democracy, and development issues means that America can't easily ignore what we stand for and what we want to do. And now, unfortunately, the Trump administration has made an overtly political appointment. This man is not a professional diplomat. He's not been trained in the ways of diplomacy. He's a political appointment. He's a political activist for many years. And in their own system, where their own nominees need to be approved by their own parliament, he made a presentation of who he is and what he stands for. So many of us were able to listen in. on what Bozell is, what his persona is like, what he stands for. And he was straightforward. He said he will come to South Africa to represent the interests of the Trump administration. And he's got a short list of 3 or 4 things that he wants to do and convince our government of. Instead of, unfortunately, what we would have preferred, but we're not getting it, is a professional appointment, an ambassador that says, I'm here to represent the interests of the country, that goes beyond, a president who's appointed for 3 or 4 years, or an administration that has a particularly tough ideological and aggressive foreign policy posture. And indeed, that second part is what we really would hope to work with Bozell. And maybe I'm not an advisor to the president, but if he's listening to this interview...
Unfortunately for him.
Well, I would say to him, put the professional business on the agenda of the ambassador. And I'll tell you very quickly what they are. Bozell is going to try to persuade our president and the government of national unity to let go of the case that we enrolled at the International Court of Justice of Israel, who's perpetrating a genocide. He will also focus on this so-called, white Afrikaner repression story. And he's also going to try to move us away from BRICS, from China and Russia and Iran, and more towards the American sort of sphere of influence. I would put that on the back burner if I was the South African president or the government of national unity. I would say, look, there are many American companies in South Africa. They provide jobs and skills. They make cars. They're in manufacturing, in mining, and so on, financial services and so on. Let's keep that alive. I think that is important. An American investor invests for 20 or 30 years, not for a period of 3 or 4 years, depending on the president of the day. That's the first thing. The second one, whether we like it or not, America has a presence in Africa, particularly now we understand that they're after critical minerals in the DRC, but elsewhere on the continent as well. The AU summit that happened just 5 days ago was of the view that as Africans, we need to take control of how we market, sell, and procure critical minerals, and preferably beneficiate it before we sell it to the Chinese or the Americans or whoever. It means the Americans are in our backyard, and we need to deal with that on a more continental level. The last one, quickly, is there's a war in Sudan. There's the world's biggest humanitarian crisis in Sudan. There's a coming war in South Sudan. There are problems with violent extremism in the Sahel. Somalia is in trouble, the whole horn. I can make that list. We need peace and security. And in fact, the UN has become incapable of bringing peace and security to Africa. So we need to work with the Americans in humanitarian and conflict resolution. And I would put these 3 business-like issues on the front of the table when we receive the ambassador.
All right, Prof, I've got to thank you for your time this afternoon. That's Professor Anthony van Nieuwkerk, who is Professor of International and Diplomacy Studies at the University of South Africa.